Hello, students, and a very warm welcome to today's explainer. I am so glad you've joined me. Just take a deep breath, settle in, and let's embark on a really special journey together today. We're going to explore Liam O'Flaherty's beautifully written story, His First Flight. Now, as we trace this young seagull's literal journey from the complete safety of his home out into the vast unknown sky, I want you to think about your own figurative flights. Maybe you are preparing for difficult board exams right now, or facing a challenge that just seems incredibly daunting. Just like our young seagull, stepping off into the unknown can be terrifying. But by the end of this explainer, I really hope you'll see how that fear can actually transform into the ultimate freedom. Here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll cover the fear of flying. Second, left alone and starving. Third, the hunger and the bait. Then, the plunge into space. Fifth, soaring over the sea. And finally, landing and celebration. We're going to cover every crucial incident and vocabulary word you need to know. All right, let's dive into section 1, the fear of flying, a coward on the brink. Right away, within the family itself, there is a very stark contrast. We have our young seagull who is just completely terrified to fly. But look at his siblings for a second, his two brothers and his little sister. The story specifically notes that their wings were actually far shorter than his own. Yet they had already taken a little run forward, flapped their wings, and successfully flown away the day before. And of course, we have the father and mother, who are actively trying to teach and urge their children forward. This paints a very clear picture of the young seagull's isolation, doesn't it? He is literally the only one left behind. And this brings us to a super important vocabulary word for your exams: ledge. A ledge is basically a narrow horizontal shelf projecting from a wall, or in this case, a steep cliff. This is exactly where the young seagull slept at night in a little hole, and it's where he currently remains, all alone. The text tells us that he failed to muster up courage to take that plunge. To muster up courage means to gather it, to collect it from deep within yourself. But for him, the plunge just appeared far too desperate. He felt absolutely certain his wings would never, ever support him. So because he wouldn't fly, his parents resorted to some pretty tough love. And this brilliantly illustrates our next keyword, upbraiding. It simply means scolding severely. His father and mother had come around calling to him shrilly, upbraiding him, and even threatening to let him starve on his ledge unless he flew away. Now, they're being harsh, but it's for his own survival. Yet his fear is so deeply rooted that for the life of him, he simply could not move. Moving on to section 2, left alone and starving, the 24-hour isolation. Over the last 24 hours, the tension has really been building up his desperation. Since the day before, nobody had come near him. He had to sit there and watch his parents perfecting his siblings in the art of flight. Now pay close attention to these exam-relevant phrases. They were teaching them to skim the waves, which means moving lightly just above the surface of the sea, and showing them how to dive for fish. He even had to watch his older brother catch his very first herring, which is a type of sea fish, and devour it while the parents circled around raising a proud cackle. And to make matters worse, all morning the whole family walked about on the big plateau midway down the opposite cliff, just openly taunting him for his cowardice. The whole family just gracefully flies away, leaving the young seagull behind on the cliff edge. You can really feel the heavy, emotional weight of being left entirely alone here. The world is moving forward, his family is progressing and celebrating, while he is just stuck on this ledge. Meanwhile, the sun is now ascending the sky, blazing down on his south-facing ledge. He's starting to truly feel the intense heat, and far more importantly, a deep, agonizing hunger. Remember, he hasn't eaten a single thing since the previous nightfall. Which brings us to section 3, the hunger and the bait, a desperate plea. So what does he actually do? He attempts a highly calculated trick for attention. Let's look at the steps. First, he steps very slowly out to the brink, or the edge, of the ledge. Second, he stands on one leg. Third, he hides his other leg under his wing. And finally, he closes one eye, then the other, and pretends to be falling asleep. He's trying his best to look frail, hoping to evoke some pity. This is a brilliant little plot detail, showing his absolute desperate desire for his family to just notice him. But does his little trick work? Absolutely not. His family on the opposite plateau took almost no notice of him. His brothers and sister were dozing, their heads sunk right into their necks. His father was preening, which means making an effort to maintain and clean the feathers on his white back. He's completely ignoring his son. Actually, only one person was looking at him: his mother. She was standing on a little high hump, thrusting her white breast forward and tearing at a piece of fish that lay at her feet. As she tore into that fish, she scraped each side of her beak on the rock to wet it. To wet simply means to sharpen. The sight of the food being prepared this way absolutely maddened the starving young seagull. He loved to tear food that way himself, scraping his beak now and again to wet it. The hunger is now totally overpowering all of his senses. And this leads to a really dramatic exchange. He cries out, "Ga, ga, ga," begging her to bring him some food. He calls out plaintively, which means in a very sad, pleading manner. His mother screams back, "Ga, ga, ga," answering him derisively, meaning she is mocking him, showing him in a very clear manner that she thinks he's acting stupidly. But he just keeps calling sadly. And then after a minute, he utters a joyful scream. Why? Because his mother had picked up a piece of the fish and was actually flying across to him with it. He leans out eagerly, tapping the rock with his feet, just thrilled that food is finally arriving. Now for Section 4, the plunge into space, madness and terror. When the mother gets just opposite to him, she suddenly halts. She keeps her wings totally motionless. The piece of fish in her beak was almost, but not quite, within reach of his own beak. He waited a moment in surprise, wondering why on earth she didn't come nearer. And then, driven completely mad by his severe hunger, he didn't even think. He just dived at the fish. With a loud scream, he fell outwards and downwards into space. Once he left that ledge, there was no going back. The very thing he had been dreading for 24 hours was now finally happening. The text describes his immediate reaction so powerfully. A monstrous terror seized him, and his heart stood still. He could hear absolutely nothing. The fear was absolute and completely paralyzing. But students, remember this crucial detail. It only lasted a minute. The absolute worst of his fear was over in just 60 seconds. Section 5. Soaring over the sea, the wind and the wings. The very next moment, he feels his wings spread outwards. The wind rushes against his breast feathers, then under his stomach and against his wings. He could actually feel the tips of his wings cutting through the air. He was no longer falling headlong or straight down. He was soaring gradually downwards and outwards. He wasn't afraid anymore. He just felt a bit dizzy, which is that uncomfortable feeling of spinning around and losing one's balance. All he had to do was flap his wings once, and he soared right upwards. Hearing him, his mother swoops past him, and his father flies over him, screaming in absolute joy. Even his brothers and sister were flying all around him. And the author uses two wonderful words to describe this: curveting and banking. Curveting means leaping like a horse, and banking means flying with one wing higher than the other. They are all celebrating his success. In that moment of pure joy and survival, he completely forgot that he had not always been able to fly. He commended himself to dive, to soar, and curve, shrieking shrilly in the wind. And finally, Section 6, landing and celebration, the green flooring. His family lands on what the author calls the green flooring of the sea, right ahead of him, beckoning and calling to him. He drops his legs to stand on the green sea, but because he is completely exhausted and weak with hunger, he just cannot rise again. His feet sink, and then his belly touches the water, and he sinks no farther. He's floating, and all around him his family is screaming, praising him, and their beaks are offering him a well-deserved reward: delicious scraps of dogfish. He had actually made his first flight. That agonizing fear was completely replaced by the joy of soaring and the warmth of his family's pride. As we conclude our explainer today, I really want to leave you with this thought-provoking question. What is the ledge you need to step off of today to discover your own wings? You know, whether it's a huge syllabus, a really challenging board exam, or just a fear of failure, always remember that the monstrous terror only lasts a minute before your instinct and your hard work take over. Thank you so much for learning with me today, and I wish you all the courage in the world for your own first flights.